my job is now really easy because I'm going to be presenting some work that I did a few years ago around the leadership style of what we call serial winning coaches. But actually, everything that I'm going to say pretty much came out in the presentations from the coaches and then the questions. So I'm just going to probably at some point just try to put a framework around that a little bit. But before we move on to that, I'm going to be talking about serial winning coaches, coaches that have won repeatedly at the highest level. I'm going to give you a chance to become a serial winning coach today. Well, actually, a serial winning athlete today, okay? You are going to engage in the first ever Commonwealth Championship for rock, paper, scissors. One of you today will go home crowned as the Commonwealth rock, paper, scissors champion, okay? I can see your eyes already lighting up like, now, winning or coaching a team or an athlete to an Olympic medal like these guys have done, okay, it's a pretty big deal. And for most coaches, the pinnacle of a career, okay? We understand that. We would all give an arm and a leg to do that. Now, when that medal is actually a gold medal, in some countries, I'm not naming names, that might get you even a knighthood, okay? If it is in the right sport, though, okay? Because knighthoods don't seem to cost the same all the time. But never mind, don't get me started. I know, eh? I'm doing a you here, okay? But really, when a coach is able to win gold medals or major trophies repeatedly with different athletes over a long period of time, perhaps even in different countries, that's a pretty small group, really, of coaches that can do that. And now we were very lucky a few years ago that through the connections of ICCE, we were able to do a study where we interviewed 17 of these coaches, and very importantly, 23 of their athletes, because we wanted to get a double take, really, to make sure that we know that sometimes coaches can tell a very good story about themselves, okay? But we wanted to get the full story. And we called those coaches serial winning coaches. Now, we wanted to understand not only what these guys do, okay, but also why they do what they do. What kind of personality traits and motivations and leadership styles led to this kind of unprecedented level of achievement? Or sometimes what kind of circumstances led to that, okay? So, now before we do that, we're going to do another little game, all right? I left some, and I have to be really careful because with my Spanish accent, every time I say sheet, it sounds like something else sometimes, okay? So you have a piece of paper on your desk, okay? And you're going to have to trust me, and I'm going to ask you to do some origami, but blind. And I apologize to those that have already seen me do this before, okay? But I've not found a better way to get this point across, okay? So if you've done it before, either don't do it or go along with it and pretend, okay? All right. From this moment on, you have to close your eyes, okay? Anybody with their eyes open will be disqualified, okay? Even if you are the Commonwealth champion for rock, paper, scissors. Where are you? Okay, there you are, okay? All right, eyes closed, get the piece of paper before you close your eyes, otherwise it's gonna be messy, okay? First, just follow my instructions, all right? Fold it in half. Okay, good stuff. And now rip off a little bit of paper from the top middle part of the paper. Okay, from the top middle, rip off a little part of it. Yeah? Okay, you're doing very good. Keep your eyes closed, please. And when you've done that, does anybody need a pair of scissors or you're okay? All right, when everybody's done that, just fold it in half again, please. Okay, and now you're going to tear off, rip off, okay, the bottom right corner. And once you've done that, you are going to fold it up in half once again. And now you're going to need more strength. But I want you to now tear off the top left corner, okay? All right, you're doing great. Okay, All right, you done? So, if you followed my instructions correctly, you can now open your eyes and you should be looking at something that looks a bit like this. No? All right, okay. Show me what you got. Open it. That's mine. Please have a look around and see if you can find someone with one that is the same as yours. Exactly the same as yours. Anybody? Completely the same? Nah, it's not the same. It's not the same. No, 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 no. Okay. All right. Now, I think pretty much everyone's is different. Okay? So, silly game, but what's the point I'm trying to make here? Look, all day we've been throwing information at you, but I think this has come through really clearly from the 4 coaches. Okay, we're giving you a lot of content today, and I'm going to give you some more. And content is king, but context is God. Anything we hear here today and for the next 3 days, you have to take away and put into the context of your coaching. Different countries, different scenarios, different situations, because there are no magic recipes for coaching. There are ingredients, but in the end, it's how you mix them up and how much you put of one or the other. It really depends on you and your personal circumstances, your athletes, and that's something that I really want to make sure that we get across, because yes, we interviewed 17, let's call them super coaches, but they were all 17 different people. Our job was to try and really distill that into some kind of framework that allows us to make a little bit of sense of it, okay? But there's 17 different people. Dealing with the same kind of issues, as you saw, we had 4 different sports, okay? All of them grappling with the same issues and finding different solutions, from the very family-orientated solution here, okay, to others, all right? So please, take everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt, and really try and make an effort, and we're going to do this later, but make an effort all the time to think about, what does this mean for me in my context? Because it might be a bit like this. Some things might be in the blue part of the circle there, where you already do this, and you're great at it, okay? Some things might be more in the green, where you would love to do that, but for whatever reason, you're either not ready, or your environment is not ready for that. And some things might be in the yellow, where it's just not for you. Not for you, not for your athletes. Thank you very much, but it's not for me. And that's perfectly fine, okay? I think one of the things that we talked about all day today is there's no, I think we've said it a million times, no silver bullet, okay, no magic recipes. Sometimes you have to wing it. We're informed wingers sometimes, okay? So please do that as we go along. And by all means, challenge. Because some things you might question, okay? Cool. So, as I was saying, we kind of wanted to move a little bit beyond this idea of traditionally research in this space looked at the coaches' behaviors. What do they do? What do they do when they're in front of the athletes? Basically, what do they do in the pool, on the track, on the court, on the pitch, okay? We wanted to move away from that, not away, a little bit beyond, to offer more detail as to why they do these things and what else do they do. Because I think one thing that is clear from today is that actually the 90 minutes or 2 hours that we spend with the athletes is just a tiny part of the job of the coach. Right? Coaches do much more than that. That's actually probably the easiest, most enjoyable part. The 90 minutes with in the skate park or on the track. Okay. So, all right. When we talk about what these guys or why these guys do things, and I'm saying guys, and I apologize, there were 3 female coaches in the sample. Okay. We tried to get more. We were unable to. Okay. Since the study, we've been trying to, through listening to podcasts and talking to people, like today with Monica, for example, trying to see if there were any major differences in the study that the 3 female coaches, their views were pretty close to that of the men, other than in terms of that sometimes getting to that level was harder for them because they had to prove themselves to be better than the men, okay? But in terms of how they went about things, relatively similar, okay? But what we saw is that the engine of everything the coaches did was based on a really strong personal philosophy, strongly defined, very clear, and a set of life values. And everything kind of really stemmed from that position, that they knew who they were and what they stood for. Now, from all these values that we saw, and remember, we also interviewed the athletes to corroborate this information to see if it matched, and it did, okay? For the most part, everything we got from the coaches was very similar to what the athletes said. All right, so first set of values there, or personal philosophy. They were strong believers on a high moral stance. And again, that came through from the interviews with all the coaches before and their presentations. Things like loyalty, respect, trust, very high on the agenda. And when we talk to the athletes, incredibly appreciated by the athletes. Because in an environment that is, by definition, a little bit cutthroat, at least knowing that your coach is a sound person that is not out there trying to trying to do good by you, even if at times they have to make tough decisions, it was really important. The fact that you could trust the coach to do the right thing, even if the right thing sometimes goes against you, okay? Or even if the right thing pushes you to do things that are quite hard to do, okay? Now, linking with that, all these athletes and the coaches talked about this idea of the athlete as a compass, okay? We talk all the time about athlete-centered coaching, right? There are a million definitions of what that means, athlete-centered, okay? In the end, it comes down to this idea of the athlete is kind of guiding where we need to go. And it was great, I think it was Scott that said before, at the end of the day, you need to be in agreement with the athlete what their goals are. And without that foundation, it's hard to move forward. But also you need to make sure that you're there for their needs and wants. And that sometimes might be a want like having fun, or a need as we will see later, I'm having trouble in my personal relationship with my partner. And at some point you're gonna have to sit down with a cup of coffee and talk about their partner. And that has nothing to do with jumping higher or scoring more goals. Or does it? Because probably it does, right? And interestingly, a bit of a surprise finding, coaches talked about work-life balance, which it was really surprising when a lot of these guys spend over 200 days away from home because they compete and train abroad all the time. But the key word here is a relative work-life balance. It's not the balance that an office worker 9 to 5 can aspire to. It's a balance that works for you individually within your circumstances. But it is a balance that we actively have to seek. Because otherwise, as I'm going to keep coming back to things that the coaches said before, because they really lift a lot of the things that I'm going to be saying. Find a balance that works for you, okay? And whatever that is, in terms of staying healthy, making time for people that you want to spend time with, like might be your family, might be friends, making time for a hobby, okay? We have to find a way to do that. For far too long, as coaches, we felt guilty for taking time for ourselves because we think we're taking that time away from someone else. But that time will actually, if we use that time to regenerate, we will be better for it. And what the athletes will get from us and what our families will get from us is better as well. Okay, and that's a hard lesson that I think 100% of coaches learn the hard way. Okay, when you have a breakdown or when you're really down and you go, I have to take time off. Okay, so hopefully we don't get to that point. So those three things really came through in terms of this really clear, really strong personal philosophy. Now, today we wanted to talk about leadership, okay? And in that sense, what we found in this group of coaches is that they really straddled a middle of the road way of leading, okay? And we call that, we wrote a couple of papers about this, and in the papers we called it driven benevolence. But we've then changed that to caring determination because we realized that when we've presented this work internationally, in a lot of countries, driven benevolence doesn't mean anything to anybody. So hopefully caring determination means a little bit more and it's easier to translate for people that don't work in English all the time. But let me explain what that is, caring determination. Have a read of that. So the relentless pursuit of excellence, balanced with a genuine and compassionate desire to support athletes, and perhaps even more importantly, ourselves. No question about it, these coaches really strive for excellence all the time. And they don't cut corners. But they really balance that with our genuine desire to do good by others. Right? When we did the research, I was expecting these coaches to be a cross between Count Dracula and the Wicked Witch of the West, and we didn't find that. Okay, we found some traits of that sometimes, but in the main, they were a lot more like this. They were people that, as I was saying before, as happy to push someone to the limits of what's possible as a human being, but also balancing that with a genuine care for people. So going from the extreme of, like I say, asking people to do really, really difficult things, to sitting down with them, and the athletes, for example, spoke about the coaches as parents, as mentors, as critical friends, as much more than just a coach. Okay, so in articulating what happens when we're trying to be determined and caring at the same time, we found a number of points there. I'm going to go through them really quickly and then explain it in a bit more detail. Well, point one, in terms of determination, unwavering high standards. Point two, a high sense of purpose and duty. Point three, a pathological desire to win. Nothing else matters. Sometimes. All-in commitment. And 2020 vision. Being able to see into the future, but also see the today. What needs to happen today. And we'll explain that a bit more. What about the caring? 3 key points there. Being able to see people first, and I think we've had a lot of demonstrations of that today, which is great. Seeking to understand, and being convinced that no matter how bad your day was, the sun is always going to rise the next morning. Okay? So I'm going to take you through these things in a bit more detail, and then we'll have a chat about this stuff. Okay. So in terms of how do we, what do we mean by unwavering high standards? A number of key things here. It's got to be a lived culture. All right? One coach said, I'm sick of going into environments where they've got these nice posters on the wall with beautiful quotes from Muhammad Ali, and then no one is living the culture. It's just empty words. The culture has to be lived. Okay? Everybody has to act in a way that the moment you walk into that environment, everybody understands how you operate in that environment. And for that, someone has to lead by example. And the coach has a big role to play in that, but also they talk about some veterans, older athletes that really sometimes their main role is to show the newcomers how we do things here. We talked about it earlier, I think it was you, Monica, about the value of the older athlete driving the younger ones, okay? A culture where you're constantly raising the bar. So there's no complacency. The moment you reach a milestone, you step it up. Okay? No resting on your laurels at all. A culture of perfectionism, where, as Scott said before, you have to control the controllables. There are far too many things that we can't control to also have to worry about the things that we should have controlled. I think that's the main message there. And all of these, I mean, I'm not saying anything new here, am I? The hard thing is doing this consistently. And that's going to be a big theme throughout the presentation. Nothing I'm going to say is rocket science or new. What's really interesting is how these guys found ways to consistently do these things. Part of the controlling the controllables, that mistakes trying to make something happen is okay, but blunders that come through carelessness are completely unacceptable. And the coaches, especially in relation to the support staff, didn't really compromise a lot. You might get away with one blunder, but if that's kind of the norm, you're not going to last a lot in that environment. Mistakes are okay, blunders through carelessness, not so much. All right? So that's the unwavering high standards. What about the high sense of purpose and duty? Apologies for the Queen there, although congratulations on the 75th, 70th, what was it? The anniversary of the Jubilee. Anyway, but there's a reason why the Queen's there, okay? Because in talking to the coaches, all of them really had this high sense of purpose and duty, either duty to the athletes, to the clubs, or to the country. A lot of the coaches that we interviewed were Olympic coaches. They really wanted to win something for their country. Now, the extreme was one coach from Great Britain who, in the middle of my conversation with him, pulled out a £5 note. This is one of the old ones. They have no real value, so don't fight me for it, okay? And he said to me, I carry this in my pocket all the time. When I see, with this kind of voice, right? Sorry about the accent. But he said to me, I carry this in my pocket all the time. When I see an athlete not working hard enough, I take the £5 note and I say to them, do you know who we're working for? We work for her. And I laughed because I thought he was joking. And he looked at me like really offended. Like, I'm not joking. I do this. I said, okay, because I really feel like I love my country. He was a former Navy officer. But the thing is, I still thought he was joking.
I showed the pictures of Boris Johnson when I did it.
Yeah. God bless you. You must be good at throwing parties. But then, that same afternoon, I spoke to two of these guys' athletes. And you know what was the first thing they said to me? Did he show you the £5 note? And I thought, oh wow, this guy is doing this for real. So anyway, but they had this really high sense of purpose. It wasn't just about them. It was bigger than them, and that drove them all the time, and particularly in the bad times, because they had a higher purpose. Okay. I think that was really interesting about the athletes, okay, because it wasn't just the Queen. They really felt for the athletes. I remember the quote one of them said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been to 8 Olympics, but for most athletes, they only get one chance. If I get it wrong, it's on me. Okay, I've blown their chance. So they had a high sense of responsibility to the athletes. And interestingly, some of them, actually quite a few of them, they said that they had the helping gene. When you look at their parents, they explained they wanted to coach because my dad was a teacher, my mom was a nurse, my dad was in the army, and they went all the way back to explore why they felt that they were always going to end up in a helping profession, they said. And it happened to be coaching. But that was really strong with them. All right, point 3. I can't really find a better picture to define how these guys operate. All right? A pathological desire to win. Really desperate to win. And when we asked them why, they weren't quite sure. But we listened a bit more, and some things came through. All right? That's what they say when you ask them. I don't know. I don't know why I need to win. But when you go a bit further, you get this. There's a bit of atonement for past shortcomings. Out of the 17, 14 were international athletes themselves. But only 2 had medaled at a major event. All right? And only 1 had won a gold at a major event. So they were making up for that. Their way back was through coaching. All right? And interestingly as well, some of them, because sometimes their careers had been cut short. We had five coaches out of 17 that had career-ending accidents or injuries. And they had to go into coaching really early. And that created this idea of, I'm doing as a coach what I couldn't do as an athlete. And on top of that, they had and I was smiling when you guys, I think all of you said this before, that you had a need to prove yourself, right? Or you, at least you were constantly doubting yourself. Am I good enough to be here? What am I doing here? How did I get here? Okay? And we talked about the imposter syndrome. We called it, these serial winners had serial insecurity. But, interestingly for them, it wasn't debilitating. They were insecure, but that drove them to work harder. It wasn't insecurity that then stops you from doing what you need to do. But they were managing that. And we came up with two ideas. The fact that somehow they could find some grounded self-belief. So I know I can do this. I know I'm doubting myself right now, but deep down I can do this. Okay? With an element, even when, because at some point they became successful. But even now, after some of them 10 Olympic medals, okay, they still kept a healthy amount of self-doubt to avoid complacency. So it's this idea of, and to me as a coach that I am as well, to me that was really, really liberating. That if these guys, if these coaches could feel insecure, it's okay for me to feel insecure. Okay, and again, picking up on your messages earlier, at some point you've all had to deal with this idea of, am I doing the right thing? Am I good enough? And that's okay, it happens to everybody. Even after 9 major trophies, like one of the coaches, one of the pro coaches that we interviewed. Okay. Yes?
Do you want to take a question now or at the end? Or at the end?
Maybe at the end better if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Thank you. It's only because I know myself, we could be here until tomorrow morning. Yeah. The idea, because I'm all in commitment, okay? So all in commitment, this idea of when they decide to do something, it's all out, right? No half measures, all right? And that translates to, for example, we found them to be very proactive decision makers, right? They don't really wait for things to fester or to become bigger. They make decisions quickly, okay? And they just go with it, like you were saying. If they have to be dictators at some point, that's fine. Because someone has to make that decision. And if we procrastinate and we don't make it, the outcome might be worse than you making the wrong decision early, okay? Because even if you make the wrong decision, at least you're going to realize earlier that it was the wrong decision. And you might do something different, okay? And they also make this idea of all-in commitment translated into a notion of they are risk takers. Calculated risk, but some of them outrageous risks, okay? Like one of the basketball coaches that we interviewed, okay, and this is common knowledge, okay, and he said to me, you can tell anybody the story because everybody knows it. Zeljko Obradovic, 9 times EuroLeague champion and world champion with Serbia. When he was 31, and he was just about to jump on to go on the bus to go to the European Championships with the national team of Serbia as the captain of that team, okay, he got a phone call from his club offering him the chance to become the head coach the following year on only one condition. You have to get off that bus and come back to Belgrade and start working tomorrow. So he got off the bus, didn't go to the Europeans, okay, and just started because he wanted to coach. He knew it was the end of his career as a player, it was his last championship, and he didn't want to he didn't want to miss the boat, right? Amazing. The rest is history, okay? But it could have backfired big time, all right? But some of these stories around taking some really big risks, okay? Some of them pay off, some of them don't. But all of them had a story of some kind of risk. And the idea of the 2020 vision, okay? where they were very good at looking into the future to understand what the sport is going to be like in 3, 4, 10 years from now. So you can be ahead of the curve. And a clear example of this, we had a coach that we interviewed shortly after the Olympics, and he said, well, if we want to win again, they got the gold medal. If we want to win again in 4 years from now, we're going to have to do what we do 2.5 seconds faster than we just did it. And my job over the next 3 or 4 months is to work out where those 2.5 seconds are going to come from and go and do it for the next 4 years. Lo and behold, the next Olympic Games came around. They won again. Time, 2.5 seconds faster. Okay? Incredible. All right? It's not always as easy because in some sports it's not that easy to measure progress, okay? But this idea of do you know what you need to do to win next time? Because what you just did might not be good enough, right? But as we said this morning as well, there's a lot of complexity. And Bobby warned around the idea of not, I think it was you, Bobby, about the idea of not being too simple and trying, this idea of clarity, okay? And what these coaches seem to do is that they appreciate that high performance sport is really dynamic, okay, and that is complex. And we called it simplexity, being able to take all the complexity of the sport and simplify it to the core elements that are important to you to get the performance that you want. The things that with your resources, with your athletes and your circumstances are going to make the biggest difference for you. So you can then go and prioritize those. Because if you try to do everything, you might end up doing nothing. That was the key message. For example, I think someone this morning mentioned the idea of the 1%ers and the marginal gains and all that. Coaches were in favor of that, providing we've covered the basics. In other words, don't be looking for those 1%ers before you've nailed the 99%. I think that was the message from these guys a little bit. And once you've really simplified that complexity, it's just the planning. With that simplex picture to plan, to share that plan with everybody, get everybody on board. Now, what about the caring? That was the determination side of things, okay? What about the caring? I mean, this morning was all about this, okay? Which I wanted to ask you a question that I will ask you probably later on when we do the little panel now, is the majority of your questions today, the questions you posed to the panel, were around this, relationships, okay? Why is that? Is it because that's a difficult part of coaching? Is it because you kind of need to get permission from this room and these coaches for you to do it because in your environment they want you to look after the technical side of things and you need permission from someone else to actually spend time, commit time to the relationship building? Why is it? Why are we so interested in relationships? Is it because we're not very good at it? And we feel there is a big gap? Okay, I'll leave that open for now, okay, but we can come back to that. But this idea is really key, that these coaches, despite how driven they are and how pathologically driven they are, they found the other side of the coin as well, okay, where they saw the person before the athlete. And I thought they were just telling lies here. But the athletes, again, corroborated this. Don't make no mistake, these guys are hard to work with. Tough cookies, right? Really demanding coaches. But it seems like they were able to do all of that because they had built the relationships that allowed them to take people to those levels of hard work, to take people to those levels of commitment, right? And because they were able to then move from one end of the spectrum to the other, depending on what they needed at a particular time. That being able to balance, challenge, and support all the time, okay? You don't have to be one or the other all the time. You can move along. This came from the athletes. Caring and putting people first translated into having a dependable and stable environment. So you know that the environment doesn't change from one day to the next, that there are massive surprises there. unless the surprises are there on purpose, because you want to shake the boat a little bit or rock the boat a little bit, and that your coach is dependable, that you can count on them. Back to the idea of trust. And finally, without having to be the heart and soul of the party, okay, or the life of the party, you have to have that level of emotional and social intelligence that allow you to really do good by people and to read rooms and to understand what's going on for different people. So as you said, Darren, you can be a chameleon, okay? Because that's what we need to do. We need to be able to change our colors as required. Then seeking to understand. We've talked, this is related to people first as well, but this is about really, do you really understand what drives your athletes? Because if we're going to ask them to do all these really incredible things and commit themselves, commit the best years of their life to this, do we know what motivates them? And again, do we make time to understand this? Are you allowed to make time to understand? Is the culture of your sport into that? Okay? Are you ready to share some leadership with your athletes? Can you make decisions in a more collaborative way, for example? Can you use persuasion over imposition? Because that's what a lot of the coaches were saying. Well, if at some point, like Monica said, I need to impose, that's okay. But as much as I can, I'm going to try and bring them along, get the buy-in that we mentioned as well before. And do they know that all your decisions are considered? Okay? That you don't just make decisions willy-nilly without understanding the implications. That's all. Sometimes that's all the athlete needs. That they know you've thought about the consequences. All right? And finally, this idea of the caring and the fact that the sun always rises again. They were serially insecure, but they were also serially optimistic. Like all of them talked about, well, I just bounce back really quickly. They had this ability to bounce back. Yeah? From the biggest of failures. Okay? Bounce back. They talked about not only getting quick over setbacks, but keeping a flat tone. So you don't get too high when you're winning, but not too low either when you're losing. Just trying to stay there as much as possible. You might have a blip where, we won, and then back in here. Okay? Oh, we lost. Okay. But really, as much as possible, stay there. For your own sake, but also for the sake of the people around you. And they were very good at accepting reality. Excuse my French, but in high performance sport, shit happens. And it happens all the time. Right? And when it happens, it's not that we are terrible coaches or bad people, it's just the way it is. So we have to reframe it. It's the way it is. What am I going to do about it? Because to me, as a coach, that was the worst for me. Every time, and it still happens, okay? Both as a coach, but also in my job at the university. When something goes wrong, my first reaction is, I'm rubbish. As opposed to, it's supposed to go wrong. Like, if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth doing, right? So that's something that these guys really cool with, yeah, well, it happens, so let's move on. And that led to them having a thick skin, either naturally or over time, to just get over things. But also, I don't know if you remember this song, Australian colleagues, Sia, Elastic Heart. I'm not going to sing it. If anybody wants to sing it, please go for it. But Sia talks about the elastic heart, okay? So it's two things. It's the thick skin, but also an elastic heart that allows you to take the emotion out of things a little bit, okay? And take it in and move on. So that's caring determination. Now, when we're thinking about, so what's the benefit of this approach that allows you to be very determined, but also very caring at the same time? What is the benefit of being able to as you said, Darren, be a chameleon and change all the time? And we thought about this idea of, I'm going to skip over that, cognitive and emotional flexibility. Okay? So, we didn't plan this, okay? But we had a chameleon on the picture, okay? Because in essence, when you think about what coaches do, we talked about that traditional research looked at coaching behaviors. What we saw in our research is that what coaches do is constantly exhibit adaptable coaching behaviors, right? Both cognitively and emotionally. So cognitive, they can really pick which color they need to be at a particular time to suit the athlete, the situation, whatever they need to be. But that also allows them to not be married to the same solution all the time and be creative about how they try to solve problems. They can, I don't know now who it was, the idea of holding two different thoughts. It was you, right, Bobby? Holding two different thoughts at the same time. Okay? Can we do that? That's a big step. When at the university, and I'm looking at my colleagues here, if we can get them to that point after 3 years of being with us, where they can really hold two conflicting points of view in their head, we've done our job. Forget everything else. Okay? They're also very self-aware, right? And to be able to change your colors, you need to know what color you are in that moment. Okay? And then the idea of self-control. And it doesn't mean that they never lose it. Okay? They also lose it, right? But they can, at least they know when they're losing it. All right? And they can sometimes stop it before. And that makes them really quick learners. These guys tend not to make the same mistake twice. They tend to be proactive learners as well. Like cognitive flexibility. And that's great. For me, emotional flexibility is even better. Because the one precondition to become a serial winner or to live a life coaching high performance is that you last the distance. And we've said that a few times today, right? The turnout in high performance coaching is incredible. All right? If any other profession had that turnout or turnover, they'd be really worried. But we seem to churn out coaches all the time, and that's okay. So emotional flexibility. To enjoy the roller coaster, I don't know who had the, I think it was you, Monica, with the roller coaster. We didn't plan this, okay? I was saying that they made my job really easy. The idea to live another day, yeah, today was rubbish, but there's always tomorrow. And be really compassionate to the athletes during the hard times, and again, most importantly, to yourself. Okay? I always talk about, we talk about 3 types of characters, okay? The coaches were either very much like Indiana Jones or Lara Croft, right? And we call it the Avenger. They needed to do something to prove themselves and be very, or they were like Gandhi or Mother Teresa. It's all about everybody else, about the greater good. But all of them, whether they were Indiana or Gandhi, they had this third character, okay, which was Homer Simpson. The realist, the guy that goes, you know what, shit happens, okay? And I'm going to take me time, and I'm going to find a donut, okay, or a beer, and I'm going to watch a football game, and that's it. And tomorrow will be another day. Right? So if you can go away with anything from this session is find your inner Homer, okay, because that will really help going forward. So that's what I was saying before, that we ended up with this idea of really adaptable coaching behaviors, okay, as something to aspire to, that we don't have to be a one-trick pony as a coach, all right? And it seems to do the trick. Okay, so what we wanted to do now is to bring the coaches, I'm saying the coaches when you're all coaches, okay? To bring the speaking coaches today, okay, back to the panel here, to do some reflection around how this resonated with you and your experience,